The internet is vast and beautiful on the surface, but if you peel back the layers, you find an iceberg whose base is black, strange, and sometimes outright dangerous. And tonight, we start at the sharp edge. The stories that refuse to stay buried, the crimes and mysteries that migrated from whispering forums into real life and into headlines. Think of Cicada 3301, a puzzle that looked like a prank but read like a recruitment drive for the hyperliterate, an invitation hidden in riddles and steganography, QR codes taped in cities across the world, and an enigmatic book that still resists full translation. A perfect example of how the net can turn
running the thermal overlay now.
Into myth. Then there are images,
enhance
photos
this section.
That refuse
That's
to
our
resolve.
target.
The so-called
I've got it.
badge
Red fabric.
in a Polaroid tied to a presidential assassination.
Move in, team.
A single blurred
We have a
frame
tent down.
whose ambiguity birthed decades of conspiracy and speculation. And the Dyatlov Pass, where 9 experienced hikers fled their tent in the dead of night and then turned into a riddle of torn fabric, unexplained injuries, and lingering radiation readings. A case that reads like a nightmare and proves that some mysteries live on because evidence and explanation don't line up. We slide from classic cold cases to modern urban legend and online folklore. Channels full of test videos that became code, WebDriver Torso. ARGs that turned fandom into treasure hunts, Cipher Hunt, Perplexity, and creepy collaborative fictions, the SCP Foundation, that blur the line between collaborative myth-making and real community-owned storytelling. But not every dark corner is fictional. And some of the most unnerving episodes
What is the closure
involve
rate on
people
target
who met
UFO
online
02?
and
It just
converted
disappeared off
private
scope. Wait,
fantasies
it's back.
into
Altitude
public
spike
tragedy.
confirmed.
One such case is the Rotenberg story, a subject that attracted global attention because it forced a painful, complicated question about consent, deviance, and when fantasy tips over into crime. In purely factual terms, a man in Germany posted
These are the
an
latest
advertisement
intercepts from the
online
field
seeking
Highly sensitive,
another
gentlemen.
adult
We need to
who
review
was willing
page
to be
7
harmed
immediately.
and then consumed. Another man replied, their meetings, conducted both online and in person, culminated in events that were recorded and later secured as evidence by investigators. The result was a criminal investigation, a trial, and a wave of moral, legal, and journalistic debate. How do we understand someone who posts a violent fantasy into a forum and another who answers it?
Deep below the waves,
Did the online
the
environment
abyssal
create a
zone
market for
remains
extreme
largely
impulses?
unexplored.
Or did it simply reveal people who had already been moving in that direction? Courts had to decide whether consent can ever transform an act
We'll be
into
right back
something
after.
lawful when the act
Breaking
itself
news
is
reports
violent
indicate
and fatal,
supplies are running
and
low.
when
Please stand
forensic
by for more
reviews showed that
information.
one participant died as a result of the encounter, the legal consequences were severe. The case opened a wider conversation about internet subcultures, specialized forums where people swap fantasies and trade logistics for extremes that once lived only in whispers. Those sites oscillate between being a forum for dark fantasy and becoming a marketplace where someone's curiosity can meet someone else's willingness. That crossing is what turns an online oddity into a criminal event. From that singular, disturbing story, we branch into cultural ripple effects, how news coverage and documentaries codify dark corners into symbols, how certain houses or towns become macabre tourist stops, and how online communities that once thrived on anonymity become the very trail investigators use to trace real-world harms. This is the pattern under the iceberg's lip, the feedback loop between fantasy and reality, anonymity and accountability, curiosity and consequence. We also meet the stranger cases that resist tidy explanations. The D.B. Cooper skyjacker who vanished midair with a parachute and a suitcase of ransom money, the pilot who reported a strange aircraft before disappearing over the Bass Strait, and a string of unsolved disappearances that the internet will never quite let go, because each new theory is another layer of meaning for people hungry for answers. The darker net is not just about crime. It's about the way media and platform design amplify certain mysteries into memes. The core, 301 views. YouTube quirk that once paused counters and spawned conspiracy threads. Or the endlessly replicating cool-s kids doodled across schoolbooks that became a shared cultural puzzle. Sometimes the iceberg is banal, a pattern of urban legends like fan death or people dying on toilets. And sometimes it's epic, like the MH370 disappearance where flight traces, satellite pings, and ocean debris tangled into one of aviation's most baffling riddles. But whether it's ancient unsolved murders or modern algorithmic anomalies, the same forces are at work. Scarcity of data, the intoxicating human desire to connect dots, and a digital infrastructure that both preserves and distorts evidence. As we begin this three-part descent, keep in mind that the web's dark side is not a fictional back alley, but a network of choices, technical, cultural, and human, that let certain ideas grow dangerous. Some entries on the iceberg are haunted archives of human error and misfortune. Others are deliberate constructions, puzzles that trick the mind. And some are chilling examples of how two people, connected by a post and a private message, can turn a typed sentence into an irreversible reality. This first part is meant to prime the viewer's curiosity and unease. We'll follow breadcrumbs that lead to cold cases and clandestine communities, tracking the way anonymity and narrative can transform private pathologies into public horror. And we'll ask the hard questions, not to titillate, but to understand why certain corners exist, why some people are drawn to them, and how the rest of us should respond when online fantasies stop being just words on a screen and become actions with victims. If you made it this far, you already know this won't be a light dive. It's the first step into a long series where the iceberg only gets more jagged, and where every answer we find tends to raise two more questions. As we continue sinking deeper into the Internet's forgotten strata, the mysteries don't just get stranger. They start folding into each other, forming a web of coincidences, unsolved incidents, digital folklore, and historical anomalies that feel almost engineered to keep investigators awake at night. Consider the max headroom signal intrusion, a moment when thousands of Chicago viewers had their TV screens hijacked by an unknown figure wearing a plastic mask, grinning and jolting erratically, as if mocking the boundary between analog innocence and a new era of decentralized chaos. Authorities never caught the person responsible, leaving behind a blueprint for future digital pranksters and a reminder that no system, no matter how public, is fully secure. Or look at the eerie symmetry between historical assassinations, where Lincoln's dream of a veiled corpse in the White House eerily foreshadows his own death, and decades later, the unresolved fragments surrounding JFK's murder spark endless theories fueled by fuzzy images, suppressed testimony, and the uncomfortable idea that official answers sometimes make less sense than the conspiracy. Layer by layer, the iceberg pulls you toward cases where truth is slippery. The Bermuda Triangle with its vanished ships and aircraft, the tangled theories about what sank the Titanic, the secretive pages of the SCP Foundation blurring fiction into something that feels disturbingly procedural, and the strange logic of internet anomalies like yay video games, one user's descent into incoherent loops that became an unintentional digital time capsule of mental deterioration visible to the entire world. Then come stories where the silence is louder than the facts, such as Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, a Boeing that slipped from the radar and seemed to outsmart every modern tracking system, or the Pentagon UFO videos once dismissed as glitches, later confirmed as objects that behaved in ways no known aircraft should. Add in the Lonnie Zamora encounter, where a police officer's straightforward report of a strange craft crouched in the New Mexico desert defied every easy explanation, or the Valentic disappearance, where a pilot calmly reporting an unidentified object moments before vanishing left behind only static and questions. These cases draw oxygen from ambiguity, and the Internet turns that ambiguity into obsession. Meanwhile, pockets of the web foster their own creeping mythology, the back rooms, born from a single unsettling photo into a labyrinth of yellowed hallways, liminal spaces that evoke nostalgia twisted into eeriness, and the endlessly mutating urban legends like every copy of Super Mario 64 is personalized, a theory so absurd yet so relatable that players begin doubting their own memories. But the iceberg isn't just about what people imagine. It's also about the moments when real-world danger crosses into digital folklore and becomes immortalized. Take the hijacking of Flight 305 by the mysterious D.B. Cooper, a man who turned a routine flight into an unsolvable puzzle and vanished into the night with a parachute and a bag of cash, leaving behind only fragments of bills washed up on a riverbank and 1,000 contradictory theories. Or the babushka lady, calmly filming during a presidential assassination and then disappearing without ever revealing her footage. Or the countless ARGs that blend puzzles, geography, and coded messages into real-world scavenger hunts, where the line between game and reality becomes dangerously thin. Even the anomalies that appear harmless, like the universal S-Doodle, the WebDriver Torso Channel, or XKCD's deceptively simple comics, demonstrate how the Internet can elevate tiny cultural quirks into global mysteries. Then there are the eerie coincidences, like the Lincoln-Kennedy parallels, so oddly symmetrical that they almost seem scripted, and the bizarre Google your name the hedgehog phenomenon, where the weirdness of fandom culture creates personalized worlds no one asked for. Between historical murders, cold case disappearances, unexplained aerial sightings, and the digital mythology that thrives on uncertainty, the iceberg's middle layers reveal the same haunting truth. The Internet didn't just collect mysteries, it amplified them, preserved them, and made them impossible to fully escape. By this point, you start to understand why people fall down these rabbit holes late at night. You don't have to believe every theory to feel the pull of something unresolved, something unfinished. And as we prepare to push even deeper in the final part, the stories shift from eerie and perplexing to something else entirely. Places where reality bends, where digital culture births its own monsters, and where humanity's darkest fears mix with its wildest imagination. Down there, the mysteries don't just confuse, they consume. As we reach the deepest section of the iceberg, the point where speculation, history, digital mythology, and human psychology start to blur into a single unsettling landscape, the stories stop behaving like separate mysteries and start connecting into a broader pattern, a world where the limits of belief, memory, technology, and fear collapse into one. Down here, we find missing people whose last movements are preserved only through grainy CCTV footage, like Michaela Bali pacing in and out of a Tim Hortons, clutching a backpack she rarely carried, sending strange messages she immediately retracted, and then vanishing between a bus depot and nowhere, leaving behind a trail of questions that the Internet would obsess over for years. We encounter ARGs like Crow 64 and Perplex City that turned ordinary players into detectives convinced that digital clues could lead to physical objects buried in real forests, and analog horror like Gemini Home Entertainment that transformed VHS-style educational tapes into a creeping mythos about cosmic threats hiding behind mundane images. We see how urban legends mutate over time, Sonic.exe evolving from a simple creepypasta into a multimedia phenomenon, the Russian sleep experiment fooling millions despite being entirely fictional, and the Jeff the Killer image becoming a lost media riddle because nobody can trace where the original face came from. We move further into strange geopolitical anomalies like Bir Tawil, an unclaimed piece of desert where self-declared micronation founders travel just to plant a flag, and Marie Birdland, a frozen void in Antarctica, so remote that conspiracy theorists project everything from secret bases to forgotten civilizations into its emptiness. Even mathematics isn't safe down here, with Graham's number illustrating how human comprehension collapses in the face of something so large it acts more like a concept than a quantity, or the linguistic oddity of buffalo, 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 proving how language itself can twist into puzzles that feel like computer glitches in human form. Political mysteries creep in too. The fraudulent 1927 Liberian election with 15,000 voters and 230,000 votes. Animal mayors, whose elections started as jokes but turned into decades-long legends. And the eerie string of tragedies known as the Kennedy curse that turned a single family into a symbol of generational misfortune. Then the iceberg plunges back into the realm of ovation and UFO lore. Mantell pursuing an unidentified object until he blacked out in the upper atmosphere, Kaikoura lights dancing alongside planes on radar and camera, and decades later, admissions from government agencies that unidentified aerial phenomena deserve serious analysis after all. This is the layer where the line between official fact and cultural imagination dissolves. Even tragedies like 9/11s become fuel for massive interpretive frameworks online as people try to make sense of an event so shocking that many cannot accept a straightforward explanation, leading to decades of controversy, confusion, and competing narratives. Then there are historical curiosity pieces like Phineas Gage, whose survival after a tamping rod pierced his skull turned him into living proof that a human personality can be rewritten as easily as damaged circuitry, or Shiso Kanekuri, the marathon runner who disappeared during the Olympics only to finish his race 55 years later, turning an innocent mistake into a record-breaking legend. The weirdness extends to linguistic glitches like January 0, a date that shouldn't exist but does, because computers needed a shortcut to forgotten digital fossils like the Moravian parallax denigrate Usenet spam bursts, to physical oddities like breast-shaped hills that recur across continents as if carved by some global subconscious. Down here, even comedy becomes uncanny, such as the AI-written Harry Potter parody that reads like a fever dream generated by a machine trying to imitate imagination. And as the iceberg closes, we encounter death in its strangest forms. People crushed by vending machines after trying to retrieve stuck snacks. Bizarre toilet-related fatalities listed in grim, encyclopedic detail. Superstitions like fan death that persisted because culture insisted on believing them. And the hidden fragility of everyday life exposed by simple objects. What becomes clear at this depth is that the Internet didn't invent darkness. It merely archived it, amplified it, and gave it infinite memory. It turned forgotten crimes into cautionary tales, accidents into legends, glitches into mythology, and mysteries into collaborative investigations spanning decades. And when people descend into these stories, they aren't just consuming content, they're participating in a long human tradition of trying to explain the unexplainable and impose narrative on chaos. The true horror of the iceberg isn't that it contains evil or fearsome secrets, it's that it reflects us back at ourselves, our curiosity, our imagination, our obsession with endings and patterns, and our desperate need for meaning in a world full of data but short on certainty. The deeper you go, the more you realize that the Internet's darkest layer isn't a place at all. It's a mindset, a lens that turns coincidence into conspiracy, tragedy into lore, and unanswered questions into permanent, echoing mysteries. And that is why the iceberg never truly ends.